As human beings, we always um, have the opportunity to improve the very quality of life for ourselves and for others, for the planet, for existence. So long as we are not having to deal with um, certain existential um, problems, terrifying situations, matters of survival, as the case is with most animals, who are always driven to procuring food, running after, finding the best shelter for themselves and for their families, as in the case of birds, for example, other animals, avoiding predators, so providing food for themselves, and also to make sure that their territories are safe so that there's no um, impending danger, terrifying, um, life-ending circumstances from its environment. So they're always in a rush, they're always, in many ways, in fear of losing their lives, as well as to reproduce. Those are the basic functions, that the basic things, the energies, if you will, the very momentum that drives animals. That's why they're always agitated. They're always in fear, even if you're as big and massive as an African elephant, or even if you're a lion. You're in fear that something bigger, another lion at least, will come and take your place. So animals have to deal with that. But human beings have a possibility to be beyond that. And that's why human beings have been the ones who have created civilizations. We're creative enough to develop sciences, mathematics, astronomy, incredibly beautiful architecture, so colorful and flourishing in their creativity over thousands of years, the remnants of which we still have in some parts of the world, even outside of museums. So we have all that waiting for us, all those possibilities waiting for us to unfold, unravel, where the very quality of life on this planet becomes wondrously beautiful and encompassing everyone and their needs. So long as we are not functioning on those basic levels that animals have to struggle with. But when you look at us, if you're really being honest with yourself, given the information that is available to you, you will see that we have stopped developing as a civilization for quite some time. If we're really being honest, I don't know if the word exists, but civilizationally, we have been disrupted for at least a few hundred years in the areas of, even sciences. Major developments have stopped really benefiting humanity at the rate that they were up until about the 19th century. For almost 200 years, we have not been developing, if we're being honest. And if you look, you see that the wars, constant, not even battles, but wars, perpetual wars, unending wars that have started from around the time of Napoleon. Even actually at the end of the 1700s. Till now, we have not been really developing. You look at the architecture for example, in Europe. So many beautiful structures were coming up. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that we have stopped building things, but advancement as such has been stalled. Why? Does that mean we don't have it in us? I think we do, but when you are overwhelmed by constant fear, constant anxieties, where you are constantly shrinking in your potentialities, where the heart is sinking, there's no joy. We don't feel lighthearted. We don't feel light-minded. Where you're concerned as to when or how will your next food come about. Whether you will have shelter for yourself and your family. Whether your family, your offspring, your children, your grandchildren will have even half of what you have. Before the Industrial Revolution, we were pretty much agrarian societies around the world, cultivating the land, so we were in harmony with the seasons, with the land, with the weather. There was respect. And things were much more flowing. But with the introduction of the Industrial Revolution, which coincides with the time period I just mentioned, we were pulled out of being farmers and agrarian, cultivating the land, providing food that is tangible, you can actually see. And that was converted into things like buying assets. Stock markets showed up. Industrial so-called revolution, where people were squeezed into lifeless factories to build things, compartmentalized. Creativity went out the window. And when we're being honest, if we're being honest, we can see how every aspect, every facet of human endeavor, let's say the creative endeavors, I mentioned architecture, things like that, music, writings, poetry, things like that, everything got affected. And there is a correlation with what was happening. So people were finding themselves barely making it. They were now pushed into tight spaces, as in the case of miners, going deep into tiny little holes in the ground to extract coal to keep the industrial machine running. You won't find anybody who was smiling and happy, and people were dying in large amounts, so in large numbers. Okay. Life was now squeezed into unnatural channels where how could civilization show up when there is so much constriction, squeezing oneself into fearful existence? Now we were even more of an inferior position as beings compared to animals. At least the bird, when it flies, it knows where to go to find food. And you won't find a bird that's dying, that's dropped from the sky because it didn't find enough seeds, it didn't find fruits, it didn't find something to eat. I don't think I've ever seen a dove or a pigeon that was anorexic or having lost most of its body fat, died of hunger or thirst even. Nor a rat, nor a raccoon. In many places in the world, we have been dealing with that. Notably, what comes to mind is human beings in Africa, human beings in the Middle East. Regions where there's war. If animals were to speak with us, talk with us, communicate with us, they would say, "What's wrong with you? Well, there's so much abundance. Why are you not enjoying the fruits of life, of existence, by supporting yourselves? You at least can do more things than we can." So civilization has been disrupted, is on, at least on pause for a few centuries. And the unfortunate reality is that this is going on and people think that this is the norm. This is not the norm. This has nothing to do with the natural process of life. This is what leads individuals to say, "Oh, this is too boring. Let us add something artificial." The big thing nowadays is artificial intelligence. There's so much money being poured into everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world. Well, what's wrong with being human? First of all, we're not even living in full capacity as human beings. But we don't bat an eye and in coming up with so-called solutions to improve the quality of life. Meanwhile, there is no quality of life to begin with, let alone improving it. When they say improve the quality of life, you know, things like self-driving cars, people talk about. And consider that as technological advancement, robotics. It's almost like children who have been given new toys. That's what we've become. Well, until the next toy, we're always looking for the next thing. Meanwhile, life isn't like that. Growth does not happen through a factory, No factory has really brought out true civilization. So the very quality of life is missing, and nothing could augment it. Nothing artificial could augment life. Real life does not need artificiality to give it more color. Artificial will mean it's not going to become natural. Artificial is artificial. It's fake. It's not real. So we have to return back, starting with the body, your own body. Healing your body with the way we feel first thing in the morning when we wake up. Is there joy or is there resentment from yesterday, left over from yesterday's experiences, events? That's the beginning. But you have to constantly take care of the body, the mind, the heart. You need to surround yourself with real life beings. And if you live somewhere where there aren't such individuals to connect with, nevertheless go outside, at least breathe the air, get some sun, listen to the birds. Go walk next to a creek. Just go walking, even if you live in a very, very busy city with no trees at all. That's fine. If you live in the desert, take off your shoes. Stand on the earth. Touch the earth with your skin. Breathe. Give yourself some time to just be, because the noise from the rest of the world, we call it technology, checking your emails, checking your phone, the news, all that is merely going to create more agitation, upset in your heart and mind. And you are now again severed in your connection to the body, to the earth, to the weather, to the environment, to the seasons, to nature. Civilization has everything to do with your relationship to nature. That is based on how you experience life. Without sounding esoteric or mystical, this all comes down to how you feel. But when we consider that being stressed is normal, being tightly wound up, where your state of peace and sense of safety is always hanging by a thread, you will not find peace. If you're always in fear of losing your job, your income, there will not be joy in your heart. You will always be in fear, just like that mouse when it's about to be attacked by a cat or some terrifying presence, a predator. That's how we feel. Unlike the mouse, however, we carry that stress with us because we're always surrounding ourselves with stress. Because the mouse, once the cat is gone, can go and find itself a nice hole, nice place, start eating some grain, some food somewhere, interact with other mice, get some sun, walk around, play here and there. We do not do that. That's why in many ways animals are in a better shape than us, and that's not how it's supposed to be. Human beings are not supposed to live and be and feel worse than animals, but that's what we are. And that's why it's no surprise that human beings do not hesitate to wipe each other out, kill, torture each other. How can civilization come out of that? There's no such thing. Building weapons, building factories for making weapons, putting the money that people work, taking that away, stripping us of income and pushing them and putting them into these huge banks to be enjoyed by the elite, the very, very, very small percentage of populations, keeps the rest of us in prison. Not just in prison of our homes and things, of jobs and careers and status, but the prison of the mind, where we don't see ourselves more than that. And maybe squeeze here and there some vacations, some time, some weekends to spend with loved ones, and that's it. What's happening during the day, during the week, between the hours? What are we doing with ourselves? You're in constant state of stress. And if you push back, pull back, and you look at the whole picture, you see how this is like a crescendo. It's building up, and it's been building up for a few hundred years, where now it's become the norm, and then human beings are being pushed out. People are talking about going and killing populations as if it's like normal conversation piece. Nobody's pausing and saying, wait a minute, what? You want to go and kill the leader of this country? You want to go and kidnap the leader of that country? You want to starve and turn off the lights of what these people in that country rely on for energy, for food, simply because you don't think that they are living according to what you want? This is subhuman. These people are criminals. These are not just one or two people, by the way, the last few years showing up on the planet. No. It's a process that's been taking place of treating us as no more than producers, consumers, enrichers of the top elite who keep tightening their grip on us. Where it's normal for us to have cancer at a very young age. It's normal for us to have, depression, to be traumatized constantly. That's not normal. That's a constant state of stress. And it is not the mistake of the individual. That has to be also stressed, because you have writers, who was it? Sapolsky from Stanford, who became famous for, what was it, the title? Why boars or certain animals don't have ulcers, I think it was, in the desert, because when the cheetah or the tiger or the lion is running after a warthog in the Serengeti, the warthog or the wild pig, if you want to call it that, is running at full speed for a short time. And eventually it evades the predator. It runs away. It escapes. Okay, it stops worrying about it. Once its central nervous system balances, it's, as we call it in psychology, it's self-regulated now. It's okay. It's safe. It's safe. It knows it's safe. It does not have high blood pressure. It doesn't carry that stress with it in order, so that it'll end up with ulcers like we do. Well, unlike the warthog, we carry pressures all around, everywhere you go, in your relationships. Fear-driven is what our lives have become, have turned into. Whether it's in the fear that your child will end up doing something that, is going to be tragic, get into drugs, bad relationships, get in trouble, harm himself or herself, or even worse, harm others. Whether your mate is going to leave you for whatever reason, whether your job is going to be there tomorrow, you're not going to be laid off, whether the government is going to tap into your income, which is barely sustainable. Previous generation of humans were much better off. In some countries, in Western countries, in the United States, there was this thing called American Dream. Now, it's not even a dream, it's impossible. Why? Because you cannot own a house. It's impossible. There was a time when people were traveling or moving or immigrating to the United States where one person, the father of the family, let's say, would work and be able to easily buy a house with that income, sustain the family, of course, with that income, plus be able to have all the responsibilities taken care of, including vacation time, and put some money in the savings. That is impossible now for 99.9% of the population. And that's not just in the US, Europe too. What does that do to the whole family structure emotionally? Everybody is worried. Now, this is not the US only. Everywhere you go. The longer you live and the longer you pay attention to what's happening, you see how it's going further and further into not so desirable prospects of whatever human beings are putting up with. And then imagine if you were a bird, or a bird looking at you, shaking its head and saying, "Wow, you humans, you're very strange." We have disconnected ourselves from nature. And by doing so, we have stopped becoming civilized. And that's why we see the world in this mess. That's why we're not growing. Despite these little pockets here and there, what many people call, civilization, writers, or art, or this and that, there is no growth. The well-being of the human heart says a lot about whether we are civilized or not. The mental state, the emotional state of a human being says a lot about where we are, civilizationally. Having so many diagnoses in the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of, mental disorders, where every year you have new so-called disorders that are not normal to have. You have the greater part of the population if not almost all of us, on some kind of medication and be looked upon as, oh, this is just normal. Having so many allergies, individuals in the world nowadays have normalized the fact that they have so many allergies. They can't eat this, they can't eat that, they can't eat that. That's not normal by any measure. Your microbiome is completely depleted. Your gut bacteria are dead. They keep feeding us antibiotics. And the food is not sustaining. It has more poison than actually nutritious attributes. Even a loaf of bread. The oil, the vegetable oil they're calling it. What is that? It's poison. That's ruining us. The sugar the other day I mentioned, it's ruining us. The events around us that keep us always unsteady, unsettled, in fear as to what might happen tomorrow, terrified, that's ruining us. How can the heart be settled in such a mess? That is lowering our energy, our frequency, our vibration, if you want to call it that, of how we feel. We do exude frequencies, you know. Even a piece of rock is putting out, it has its own frequency, you know. Even a metal bar has, a bridge has its own frequency. Tesla proved that. We have stopped growing, and let's change that. So if the world is not joining your efforts in civilizing itself, but at least you go ahead, ignore what the rest of humanity is doing in, you know, as it continues on this self-destructive path, choose not to follow along. Your feet are your feet. Your lungs are your lungs. Your eyes are yours. Look at things that are positive. Choose to live with virtue, which is, by the way I understand it, the way the Dhamma teaches, the Buddha has taught. Virtue is number one. Virtue is at the cornerstone of civilization. Technology is a tool, is an instrument, as is artificial intelligence, as are whatever kind of novel, new ways of doing things. A calculator is a wonderful instrument. But it's an instrument. I have to use it. A knife, a table, a pillow, all these are instruments, are things that we use to improve the quality of life and to improve your flow, workflow, to release some of the responsibilities, extra responsibilities. So for you to do what? I was mentioning about self-driving cars. Okay, what are you doing with the rest of your time? People were saying, the new electric cars, this and that. It's self-driving cars. Okay. I've seen people, videos of this. They're sitting in the car early in the morning going to work while the car is driving you to work. You're sitting in the car while the person is doing what? At least you can meditate. But what most people are doing is they're sitting on their playing their stupid video games or checking their emails. That's a waste, because now you're just adding more lifeless activities, which means you're depleting the very juicy fabric of life for you to live as a human. In that sense, yeah, you are living worse than in a machine. A machine at least can be turned off. You are not, because even when you go to bed, your brain is not turned off. That's why you're going and asking the psychiatrist to keep loading you up with psychiatric meds and thinking that's normal. No civilization is going to come out of psychiatric drugs, you know. There are promoters of this, of course, but they're all part of the problem. You don't want to spend a day with such characters, or an hour, because they can flip on you anytime. They're worse than drug addicts. They are drug addicts. They don't know how to live. They don't know how to love, really. Because they have disconnected themselves from the very stream called life through the body, normally. A pigeon has a lot to teach them. A rat has a lot to teach them about living as a living being. So civilization and your well-being are interconnected. If you don't have well-being, if you're living in constant fear, forget about it. There's not going to be any civilization. Because there's no peace in you, despite what you want to or expecting to have the world around you to become. You cannot enforce upon the world peace while you are in turmoil, while you are enraged, resentful. There cannot be peace as an outcome of that.